Hey everyone, welcome back to my shop. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris. This is a glimpse inside a two-part series on how I made 5 dining tables. Check them out right there. I'm not gonna give you that big of a sneak peek. This video is part 1 of a 2-part series. Welcome, let's get right into it. Let me show you how we did it. Okay, before we get into this, I'm gonna tell you this is a 2-part series because I did a questionnaire, a poll on YouTube. Well, see if you guys wanted a long 45-minute video or to break it up. And most of you, I would say 75% of you said, hey, let's break it up. So this is part 1. In this video, you're gonna see me make the aprons and the legs. Lots of plywood in this one. Not too much hardwood going on. That's in the next video, how I made the tabletops, the finishing, all that good stuff, and how I got it all together to actually make this really intimidating client build. Well, anyway, I'm not gonna waste any more of your time. This is gonna be a lengthy one, so join me for this. It should be good. I hope you learn along the way, as I know I did. So let's get into this shop and let's build this. All right, day 1 of this project, here we go. This is what I got. All the lumber we need to make 5 dining tables is right there. And this is my local dealer called Florida Southern Plywood. But they also have veneered ply and all the hardwoods to match. So I'll link them down below as well. Anyway, let's get this back to the shop and see what we can do. All right, so we're home. We've gotten most of the wood out, but here's the method that I'm using. Basically, putting it on this cart right here. So from the truck to the cart to the shop. Cool process. Okay, now I know I could just open that big 10-foot bay door and drive the truck back into the shop, but it's insulated and the AC feels really nice in here, and it's about 100 degrees today, so that's why I'm using this method. So it's time to put these 8/4 pieces of maple, mahogany, and walnut to the side, let them acclimate to the shop. And now it's time to cut some 4-inch strips because we're gonna be stacking all these pieces of Baltic birch to make the table legs. Okay, so this is my first attempt at trying this panel system of gluing up boards. I'm not gluing up a panel right now. I'm gluing up a bunch of layers of plywood. So I've got a couple things I need. I'm using, well, one of these applicators. And of course, I've got this Tight Bond Extend. Gives you longer open times. I don't want this stuff seizing up on me before I'm able to get all, well, I'm gonna do half of them. I'm gonna do 10 legs out of the 20 I need. These are gonna be cut in half. So I'm gonna do 10 legs over there, glued up. I'm also gonna put a small brad nail in each of the pieces to kind of keep them from shifting around until I get them over there. I'm gonna cut off the excess. I'm making these longer than I need. So wish me luck. Let me show you how I'm gonna do this and let's get right to it. So I've got 4 pieces of my Baltic birch cut into 4-inch strips. I'm gonna layer on 3 pieces with the Tight Bond Extend, stack them up, put a brad nail in each one. That way I've got a piece made up of 4 pieces of plywood. Repeat this process till I got 5 individual pieces and then bring them over to the panel jig. Now essentially these just rest in the bottom. It's adjustable. More information on this can be found. I'm gonna link this from Amazon down below. If you wanna check it out, by all means. It's actually a pretty handy little system. And I'm really glad I had it for this because it made this process really easy. This particular model is adjustable up to 41 inches tall and 84 inches wide. I don't need it that wide. I only need it around 60 inches. So the 6 spacers you see there, the 6 clamps that I'm screwing in, are really putting adequate pressure down. And there is what it looks like when it's all said and done, when the panels are all glued up. So it's moments like these that make me wish I had already built a miter station. I think if I'm gonna start doing more of this kind of work, I'm gonna have to do something like that. But this temporary solution is gonna work for now. It's just what I got, so let's go. So with the plywood legs drying, I'm gonna take this opportunity to cut down all the hardwood into its rough lengths. Okay, this might be the best piece of the whole lot. It's over 13 inches wide. It's 13 feet long, and of course, 8/4 stock, which is 2 inches. 8/4 of an inch. Makes sense, right? So I can't really cut that on that little bitty baby miter saw, so I'm just gonna do it the old-fashioned way. I do realize I said the old-fashioned way using a cordless power tool. I understand the eye. Funny, I said old-fashioned way with the power tool, yet I bring in a handsaw to finish up the job here. Okay, so 2 sets of legs are in the books, and that one back there was the first one I made, and that was the trial and error where I made this jig. It's crazy. It's only specific to my needs for this one project, but since I was making, 20 legs, I said, why not? Also, I'm gonna have a whole bunch of these offcuts of, of plywood. Maybe I should send these to McCollum out there in Seattle, see what he can do with them. Okay, so I made a few table legs off camera, but this jig, basically the face side of the plywood goes up on that side and the edge side goes up on the other. And then I make 2 cuts rotating 90 degrees to the right on 2 legs, and then 2 cuts rotating 90 degrees to the left on the other 2 legs. I know it's crazy. It all makes sense if you've ever made tapers before. It's really kind of hard to explain at this point, but this is what works for me. And it doesn't quite cut all the way through, and I'm going to explain exactly how I'm going to make these legs here in this next clip. So check this out. So you might be wondering, you know what? They didn't cut all the way through, and you'd be right. And the next step in this process is to finish it on the bandsaw and the jointer. This is a bit of a complex process to make one taper, I get it. But it works, okay? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna run it through the bandsaw on one edge, and I'm gonna separate that piece off. I'm gonna go to the jointer, and I'm gonna joint that cut flush. By the way, why not just cut them on the bandsaw? Why do this whole table saw thing? You know how much stress would be on this bandsaw here to cut through all this material? It'd be a lot. Now, if I had a big, massive, 18-inch Laguna or something like that, it'd be a different story. But I'm gonna cut it, joint it, then come back, flip it 90, cut it again, and then join it, and that's a finished tapered leg. So join me for this process. With the kerf cut already in there from the table saw, it's pretty easy to follow the line with the bandsaw. I'm then gonna bring it over to the jointer, and as you see, I make a few light passes at roughly about 1/16 of an inch each, and it reveals kind of some really crazy grain, which is really cool. And that's kind of the effect I'm going for. The reason I'm doing plywood with what seems to be really nice hardwoods is because it gives you this really cool effect. And in the next video, I'm actually gonna dye these black, and the effect is really great. So definitely subscribe, stay tuned for that. That's gonna happy with the result. Okay, so here's one of the really legitimate challenges that I'm having with this build. The fact that there's not only 5 tables, that's a challenge, I think. But the main thing is that they have to be able to be flat packed and shipped to Texas. So I'm thinking I'm gonna do this a little differently. Typically, I would put the legs on the tabletop, which this is not it, this is a mock-up. I would make the tabletop to specification, put the legs on, make my measurements, cut my aprons, and install everything. This method, I've got a mock-up here that represents what the final tables are gonna be. I'm gonna put my legs on there, I'm gonna mark my aprons, I'm gonna build the aprons themselves, the whole squared unit. But I'm gonna have to be able to bolt on these legs instead of just lag screw them in. Therefore, you may have seen bolt-on furniture when you buy it at a store. We're gonna try to replicate that, but except we've got really solid materials instead of press board, which is the idea. So, wish me luck. Hope this works, and I'm gonna get right to it. Okay, that piece of plywood is essentially the length and width of the final dimensions of the table. I'm gonna take some careful measurements here, and all those pieces that I just cut to make the aprons, I'm then gonna come to the crosscut sled and cut them to final dimensions. Looks like it's fitting pretty well, and I'm happy with it. So, the next step is to go ahead and finish off all, 20 pieces for all these 5 tables. And honestly, this process went pretty well. And at this point, I could actually see a table being made. I could actually set this up to where finally I was getting the result of what looked to be like a table. And speaking of tables, we're gonna have a little fun here in the shop. You know, you guys are always so thoughtful and so kind when you see me interact with my kids in the shop. And I do want to let you guys know in every video, I do have their utmost safety in mind. Of course, they are my children and I do love them very dearly. And I would never put them in harm's way. So I just want to let you guys know that as well. Okay, moving on. We're taking some of that same apron stock and we're going to rotate it up and down, cutting these 45-degree angles, making the corner supports as well. I'm also going to put a small groove in the bottoms of these aprons that are going to accept the clips that are going to hold the tabletop to the base as well. So I'm going to speed this process up a little bit more than normal because I've already released a video on how I made this jig. This jig is essentially something that was integral to me. Well, I had to put these legs directly at 90 degrees up to the drill press, but I had to have them oriented at 45. And by building this, you can see here, I was able to drill straight down exactly into these legs where I needed to install the bolts that are going to make this whole thing possible. So if you want to see this video in its entirety, it's linked down below as well. Definitely check it out. It was a fun build and I think there's some pretty cool information involved as well. So making these 5 dining tables, I'm finding that it's easier to use a plywood template tabletop to put the understructure together. So I'm gonna pull this off now and just show you what's underneath. As you can see, it would be much easier to do it this way than to try to clamp everything in place and then do it that way. I know that because I clamped everything in place the first time and figured this is how to do it. So check this out. Now this is my 4th one. I've got 1 more to go. And these things are rock solid, man. So there you go. Okay, what I'm gonna show you here, I repeat on all 4 sides. I basically take an apron, I put it in place exactly where it needs to go on the template, clamp it in place, and then screw it in from underneath. So now it's time to drill the necessary holes into these 45-degree angle corner brackets. Now this process took me quite a while to do all 20 of these, but as you see, I countersink 4 holes thusly. Then I take a Forstner bit and I drill roughly about halfway down on both sides of the piece. At this point, looking pretty good. I then take a brad point bit that's just a wee bit larger than the diameter of my bolts, and there you go. That's the piece complete. I made 20 of those, but to install them, I'm gonna show you just one. I basically take a clamp with a 45-degree angle notch or a 90-degree angle notch up on a piece there to make everything a little bit easier and make sure everything's really driven home in place. Once it's not moving, clamps in place, we're gonna drive in 4 3-inch screws, and this thing is not going anywhere. I repeat that same process on all 4 sides, and we're good to go. So now I'm gonna show you how to install the leg. I basically put a large washer in, a lock washer, and then a nut. Drive it home with just the right amount of tension with an impact driver, and that is really one of the strongest leg joints that I could think of. I'm gonna show you one more time this little groove I'm putting into these aprons that's gonna accept these clips that are gonna hold the table onto the actual base. Now, more about how I'm attaching these to the final structure in the next video. So just be patient and you gotta stay tuned next week to see that. Also, this is how it's done. I basically take some 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood and I drill a few pocket holes in some pieces that really aren't really any length in particular. I'm just kind of making it so, one, it looks good, and two, the reason you're gonna see this big gap in the middle, the reason it's not connected, well, I thought at one point I was gonna flat pack the legs in that space that you see me drilling into right there where that little red square is, but it didn't end up working that way because I actually forgot that the bolts are sticking right out of the legs, and either way, it was still a pretty strong structure, but that's why you see that open piece in the middle. And yep, sometimes you make a mistake and it actually works, and that was a mistake, but it worked out pretty well. And now this is the first time I'm actually gonna see this thing looking like a real table. Now these bolts are strong enough, I should just be able to lift it over. They should be. It all worked! Okay, moving on. So now for a little disassembly, we're gonna take the plywood top template off, and I'm actually gonna put this down on the floor to see how strong this thing is without a tabletop. And I'm pleasantly surprised at just how rigid this thing actually is. And there you go. That's an apron and a leg understructure for what's about to receive a really thick hardwood top, and there you go. Okay, and that is where I'm gonna end this video right here. The aprons are done, the legs are done, 5 aprons, 20 legs. Hope you enjoyed this process. Hope you learned a lot along the way. I know I did. Now, the link to part 2 will be in the description in this video in about a week's time from the original air date. So if you haven't seen that yet, and it's been a few weeks or however long, it's gonna be in the description as well, along with the jig I made to help me drill into those legs. So that's it for this one. I thank you guys so much for being here. I really do. It means a lot. This has been an exciting journey, an exciting project, and stay tuned next week, part 2 on how we finish the whole thing up. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on that next video.